Hello and welcome back to the Weekly Huddle podcast. I know it's late in the week, I get it, but listen, we're here and we're ready for our Week 4 USFL Power Rankings. Now this week, as you know if you tuned in last week, it was a struggle. There were some teams that I really didn't know where to put them, I didn't know where they would fit. This week, complete opposite. Boom, 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 repping them out, knew exactly where everyone needed to be. You know, we have some risers, we have some fallers, we have some teams that impressed, we had some teams that did the opposite of that. So I'll get started with my number 8 pick, and this one shouldn't be too shocking. It's the Showboats. Now, you know, I will give it to the Showboats. They did have themselves a little battle. All right, Kelly kind of had himself a good game. 21 for 38, 307 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. He played solid. Don't look at the run game because they didn't have one. But, you know, on the passing side of the ball, they did their thing. They did a pretty solid job. McDaniel is kind of forming into that dude. Only 3 catches, but he had 71 yards and a touchdown. He absolutely did his thing. Mitchell did his thing, 2 catches for 56 yards. White had 2 catches for 36 yards and a touchdown. So, you know, the receivers are putting in some work. On the defensive side of the ball, you didn't really have much. You had 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss, 1 pick, and then 4 passes defended. One of those, of course, including the interception. You did have 1 fumble lost, unfortunately. On the returns, nothing too crazy. The longest return was a kick return for 44 yards, but besides that, nothing too out of the ordinary. On the kicking side, almost perfect for Wright. Just missed 1 extra point, but 2 for 2 for field goals, a total of 8 points for his team. And punting, Wright again, solid average of 50 yards per punt, had 4 punts, 1 inside the 20, 1 touchback. His a long of 76 though. What an absolute boot. But this team, you know, like in my notes I got McDaniel, again, that dude. Kelly had himself a pretty good game. Like, Kelly had a decent game. You can't take away the effort that Kelly put in. Came up short in the end, though. They need better trench play all around, period. On the offensive side and on the defensive side, they just need to do better in the trenches. And they're tackling. They can't just let up so many weak arm tackles that just letting guys break free and go for yards. Like, you can't let that happen. I need to see more out of this team. I need to see this team get their first win. I'm silently rooting for them, but I need some. I really do need something. But unfortunately, there's not too much to say. I think it's clear, bottom of the league, only team that hasn't won a game yet. You know, they got to pull something together. They got to get a good team win in, and hopefully that'll help build some momentum sometime in the season. But we'll move on here. We'll go on to our number 7 ranked team, and that's going to be the Stars, who lost to the number 8 ranked Maulers last week. So you go in, you're ranked number 5, facing ranked number 8. And I'm like, all right, let's see how this goes. You know, I'm expecting the Stars to pull forward with a win here, and I'm surprised to report that they did not. Cookus had a 23 for 36 game, 238 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. QBR of 69. Nice. Rushing game, another team where the rushing game was just not there. When you have the number of rushing attempts as the same number as the number of rushing yards, that being 18, and your average rushing yards per play is 1. There's a problem. There is a problem there. I will say receivers still doing their thing. Coleman, 8 receptions, 86 yards, 1 touchdown. Overton, 6 receptions, 77 yards. 2 solid dudes. I want to see more of those, that back half of those receiving threats kind of push forward. But we'll move on to defense. They had 5 sacks, 5 tackles for loss on the day. They had 0 interceptions, but they did have 3 passes defended. Total of 72 tackles on the day. They had 1 fumble lost, 1 fumble recovered, and 1 forced fumble. On the return game, again, another one where there's nothing really too crazy. The longest return was a kick return for 34 yards, so nothing wild And then, pretty good day for kicking and a pretty good day for punting. Now, let's get into some of the notes that I have for this team. I felt like Cookus was trying to do too much sometimes. We saw that he was trying to force the ball into certain places, or he just wasn't finishing his reads. And sometimes it just looked like he was trying to do too much. Sometimes he needs to slow down, trust in the play, trust in his players around him. The team as a whole, I believe, just needs to execute better, period. They're way too one-dimensional. Oh my gosh. Especially on offense. On offense, they only have passing. They do not have a running game. You notice that the teams that are at the bottom of the barrel are the ones that seem to struggle having a multifaceted offense, having both a receiving game that can get you and a rushing game that can get you. If you have both, then you're doing pretty solid. Now, that's not to say for everybody, right? But we see the teams that are doing the best in this league got it all. They're doing it all. And I'll just finish up by saying you cannot lose a game in this fashion. I feel like, you're coming in against who I had as one of the bottom teams in the league. Some people might have had him as number 7 ranked, number 6 ranked, number 8 ranked. I had him as the last ranked team in the Maulers. So you go up against one of the bottom feeders of the league. You score a touchdown out early, and then from there it is just punt. You get the occasional field goal. Punt, fumble, interception. Those fourth quarter interceptions killing you. You just can't lose a game in this fashion. You know what I mean? And that's why I feel like I'm comfortable putting them at 7. Because when you lose a game like this to this opponent, my faith for you moving forward is kind of dropping. That stock is falling. Now, this isn't to say that I've lost faith in the Stars, but you're treading into some high waters here. Especially next week, you're about to go up against the Houston Gamblers, who are starting to get hot. The first week, L. Second week, L, but we saw improvement. Third week, first W. They've gradually been improving. And this Stars team has been doing the exact opposite. They've gradually been decreasing their ability to play. They can't rely on Cookus to do everything. We saw what happened in this game when you rely on Cookus, right? So, I don't know. I'm worried. I'm worried for this team. I as of right now, I do not think that they're worse than the Showboats, but I'm not going to say that they're better than any of the other teams that we have in the league currently. With that, I'll move on to my next team, which is the Maulers. Kind of fitting, going from the Stars to the Maulers, being that they just played each other. But Maulers are who I have at 6th. I believe their win against the Stars puts them just above the Stars, but no further. As far as the stats in the game, if you just look at the stat sheet, you might be like, what is wrong with you? Why are you putting them above the Stars? Right? Because Williams, 10 for 18, okay, for 96 yards and a touchdown. So not even 100 yards passing. You had a total of 135 yards rushing on 31 rushes, but, 7 attempts and 65 yards of that was Williams. On the receiving side, again, nobody's really standing out because there was no receiving game this time. I will say, though, Foster, I'm telling you, Foster is one of my favorite players to watch in this league. 11 tackles, 5 solo, 2 tackles for loss, 1 pick, and 2 passes defended in this game. Absolutely balled out. As a defense, they had a total of 3 sacks with 5 tackles for loss. They had 2 interceptions and 4 passes defended. They had 1 fumble lost, 1 fumble recovered, and 1 forced fumble. On the kick return, they did have a kick return for a long of 55. And Henny coming in with the punt returns, a punt return for a long of 53. An average of 22.3, though. Kicking side of the ball, field goals, fantastic. Extra point, the one that they had, not so much. And punting, pretty good day, long of 54, average of 46.5, pretty solid. Now, the first thing that I have on my notes is that Henny is so fast, and Henny could be utilized as such a weapon for this team, and he's just not. I want to see them try to involve him more, whether it is in the special teams realm, because that's really where he resides and where he thrives right now. But, putting him out there on maybe some jet sweeps and allowing him to try to blossom in the offense, try to get some sparks in there when they need them, I think that would be huge. The O-line cannot perform like this every week. The O-line play was just not... it was just not it. Like, it was... Ugh. The defense continues to be very fun. The D-line especially, and Foster, of course, but that D-line was putting pressure constantly. The fact that they won with 0 passing game is still so hilarious to me. Blewett is absolutely the MVP of this game. This offense needs to find the end zone more, period. Blewett did fantastic, getting his 5 field goals. How many points? I need to check real quick how many points. He had 15 points total. Now keep in mind that the final score was 21-13. So he had 15 points out of the 21 scored for the Maulers. You can't tell me he wasn't the MVP. Absolutely balled out for him. But, this offense needs to find the end zone more. Period. You can't rely on your kicker every single week. You just can't. You don't see, like, the Ravens relying on Justin Tucker every single week to score every single one of their points. You know what I mean? It's a team effort. You got to work as a team to win these games. And the run game, as mentioned before, needs to be more than just Williams. You got to get some of those guys involved. Again, just like I said before, there's a trend. If the running game isn't there, if the passing game isn't there, you got to have a good balance of both. But it seems as though these bottom of the league teams are lacking in that run game. I think it's starting to formulate into a little pattern. If you can give a little burst, give a little excitement, give a little spark in that running game, maybe you have a better chance at winning some of these games. And I think a lot of that can potentially start at the O-line play. A lot of things that we see with these bottom teams too is the lackluster O-lines. Try to improve some of this O-line play, try to get these run games started, and maybe you might have yourself a couple more wins under your belt. Now, before we get into our next team, Owen, I'm going to need you to put on your editing hat here and, maybe edit some explosions, edit like how all the other YouTubers do it when they bring this up. But if you're enjoying the video, guys, I'm going to need you to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you will know exactly when we post brand new content. Hopefully Owen made that look dope, because if not, then that was really stupid, and I just look like an idiot. But when do I not? We'll move on here. We got our number 5 team, and it is the Houston Gamblers. And here the Gamblers are, picking up their first win of the season against the Showboats. Again, maybe not the greatest opponent they could have faced, but a win is a win nonetheless. Bahar, again, the steady improvement with this team is something that I'm liking to see. 22 for 36, 235 yards for 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, QBR of 87.2. In the rushing game, Thompson had 21 attempts for 81 yards and 2 touchdowns. Pledger also tacked on 4 attempts for 44 yards. In the receiving game, Hall, Peterson, Thompson, top 3 receivers, especially Hall, 6 receptions, 90 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Absolutely stole the game away. On the defensive side of the ball, they came away with 2 sacks, 6 tackles for loss, 1 interception, and 6 passes defended total. Once we get to fumbles, we just had 1 forced fumble and a recovery. We had some kick returns, nothing sticking out. Ratcliffe Williams handling the bulk of the kick returning duties. Punt returns, Hall had 2 for 25 yards, an average of 12.5. Again, nothing insane. Kicking side of the ball, Vogel missed 2 kicks, 1 field goal, and 1 extra point, so that's something you would like to see improved. Punting, another thing you would like to see improved. An average of 39.8 yards isn't the greatest in the world, but 3 punts pinned inside the 20 paints a different picture. Now, for the Gamblers, Thompson's trucks are so clean. That's the one thing Thompson is becoming one of those guys that at the running back position, I just enjoy seeing them get the ball, just because I am looking forward to seeing a defender fall flat. Just get absolutely rammed into the ground, trucked, stiff arm, whatever. Thompson's trucks are nasty. And you have to keep letting your playmakers do their thing. Especially guys like Hall, who have continued doing their thing. Hall is absolutely, I think, the MVP of this team so far. Their O-line has done a pretty solid job, actually, of keeping a clean pocket and bringing forward some running lanes. Nothing perfect. It wasn't like the greatest game in the world for an O-line, but in a league where we see a lot of O-line troubles, this was a pretty solid game for the Gamblers in the trenches. Look like team improvement each week, not kicking, maybe, but the entire team looks like every single week they're making steps to improve more and more and more. First with their loss week 1, then with their much closer loss, and it gave me a lot more hope, is what I'm trying to say, in their week 2 loss, with the amount of points that they scored especially, and now finally getting their first win. I think slowly they're kind of building themselves up, and they're building their identity, and they're figuring out what exactly they want to do and how they're going to execute. I don't like this game so close, especially with it being against the Showboats, but I'm not going to be the one to discredit a win. A win is a win regardless, and having a nice, good team rally at the end to win the game is something you love to see, and is something that's going to bolster this team's confidence moving forward. Next up on the power rankings, you got the Panthers. Love went 15 for 31, 101 yards and an interception. It's also good to note that Strong went 4 for 9 for 62 yards and a touchdown. On the rushing side of the ball, Scott had 12 attempts for 63 yards. Nothing too crazy besides that. On the receiving end, Quinn, 5 receptions for 61 yards and a touchdown. Nobody else really stepping up too much outside of that. You have Corbin racking in another 5 receptions and Walker racking in 4, but neither of them above 30 yards. On the defensive side of the ball, they had 1 sack and 1 pass defended, and that was it. They had a forced fumble that was recovered for a turnover, and that's pretty much it. Nothing too exciting on the kick returns and the punt returns. Murphy had a pretty good job kicking, only 3 kicks total, but made all 3 of them, a total of 7 points. Punting, Kramer did solid, long of 57, 53.2 average, 2 pinned in the 20 with no touchbacks. All around good day on special teams. Now, this game was interesting, and I'll talk more about it in the Generals viewpoint later when we get to it. But for now, I'll just look at it from the Panthers' point of view. You cannot give up that many big plays. If you do not allow all of those big plays to happen, then you win the game. When those big plays weren't happening, you had pretty solid control of what was going on. If it wasn't, a pass for 79 yards and a touchdown, 2 plays, 82-yard drive, then it was like a 3-and-out or a 6-and-out, right? Your defense cannot, the entire defense is getting faked out by, screens and, fake runs and all this stuff. They are just undisciplined, just falling for everything. And these are, I feel like, I'm no coach. I don't analyze plays. I'm not but, if I can kind of see how the play is going and what's going to happen, then I feel like, professional footballers should be able to see it and kind of diagnose what's going on. Their quick passes helped due to the amount of pressure the O-line was just letting through constantly. When guys like Love were able to just get those passes out quick, it was great, because you couldn't really stand in the pocket for any longer than those quick passes. So you had to rely on that, pretty much. And, Scott toward, the middle and the end of the game, I'd like to see Scott getting going more early in the game. I'd like to see him being a constant threat throughout the entire game, something that they continue to utilize. Don't be afraid to give him more than 12 attempts, is what I'm saying. I feel like this team could benefit from giving him a little more. And I think some of the mistakes by Love, like the interception, some of those mistakes just have to be corrected. I think this team isn't in bad shape, but they're also not in great shape. They're definitely deserving of their record, I feel like, but I think their ranking is justified, their place here is justified, and they have all of the tools and capabilities necessary to make a step forward. I'm just not sure if that step forward is going to happen, or if we're going to continue to take steps back. I don't know, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next week. Now, since we did just look at the loser of this matchup, it's only appropriate to look at the winner of this matchup. Coming in at our number 3 spot in our power rankings, we have the New Jersey Generals. The Generals had themselves a game. It was a game. I'll call it that. Johnson went 10 for 15 for 180 yards, 2 touchdowns, a QBR of 147.2. And rushing side of the ball, 198 yards on the ground. Johnson, 10 attempts for 98 yards and a touchdown. Victor, 9 attempts for 68 yards and a touchdown. On the receiving side of the ball, Moore, 1 catch for 72 yards and a tutty. Victor, 1 catch for 51 yards and a tutty. Everyone else, was just kind of racking up receptions, nothing really standing out. On the defensive side of the ball, Hines had a really good day, 11 tackles, 3 of them were solo and 2 passes defended. Elston had a good day, 6 tackles, 4 of them solo, 1 tackle for loss, 1 pass defended. Render, 5 tackles, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss, and 2 passes defended. They had some guys doing some good things on the defensive side of the ball. 2 sacks in total, 4 tackles for loss in total, 1 interception, but 10 passes defended total by this defense. And everything else is pretty standard. No field goals attempted, but all extra points were made. Punt returns, 2 returns for 7 yards, not great. Kick returns were alright. Punting was pretty solid. 3 punts inside the 20 along of 53. 1 fumble lost. And now into my notes, which... Such a goofy game. The Generals literally just said, if it's not a big play, we don't want it. We don't care. Like, if it's not gonna be a drive that ends in a big play, or has a big play in it, then it's just a dud drive. Punt it away. What's the point of even playing the drive? Victor is so very fun to watch. He's just this little bowling ball that just barrels down the field, and I absolutely love it. He's one of my favorite running backs to watch. Oh, it's so fun. The pressure from the defense was pretty solid. I would like to see the O-line hold out a tad longer so that, Johnson doesn't feel like he has to default to the scramble so much. I'd like Johnson to stand in the pocket a little longer, go through his reads. There were some times where, on the fumble play, for example, he could have hit the tight end going across the middle of the field. If you led the ball correctly, the defender was kind of on his back, but I think you had a step ahead of him to where you could fit that ball in and not have to feel like you have to scramble forward, which ended up leading to their fumble. So I think maybe a job for both the O-line and the QB. Johnson, I think, should hold out in the pocket a little longer and trust his reads and try to, fit that ball in a little bit. Trust your throwing arm. And I think that the O-line can do a better job of just providing some of that pass protection for him so he doesn't feel like he has to go out there and scramble and do everything, kind of like that Josh Allen effect in his early years. The last thing that I had for them was that I really, really liked what the secondary brought. 10 passes defended is crazy. Very fun to watch. It was like, especially at the end of the game, it was like every play, boom, batted down, boom, batted down. There was batting down at the line. Cornerbacks were batting down passes. Linebackers weren't having it. Everybody was just having a field day, and it was very fun to watch. Now, as I usually do, I usually talk about my top 2 teams in the same little section. But that's been mostly because, they've been pretty even. They've been pretty solid. But we've had a distinct number 1 this whole time, so there really wasn't much to say until now, because we have the Breakers defeating the Stallions 45-31, which is plenty for me to decide, you know what, Breakers, you are absolutely the number 1 team in this league, and the Stallions, I'm sorry, you're getting bumped down to number 2. We'll start with our number 2 Stallions. We have 17 for 26 from Magoo, 238 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, QBR of 104.3. Rushing side of the ball didn't really get anything going, which is shocking to say from this high up in the power rankings. I said it plenty of times. It's usually the bottom guys that are that are missing out on that run game. And, the Stallions have had running games in weeks prior, but I think this is just a formula for victory. Not even so much a formula for whether your team is necessarily good or not. If you want to win the game, you got to get both going, is what it seems like to me. Receiving end, Davis, 5 receptions, 123 yards and 1 touchdown. Pretty much carried the Stallions on the receiving end. On the defensive side of the ball, you had 0 sacks, you had 2 tackles for loss, you had 1 interception and 5 passes defended. You had 1 fumble. It was recovered, however. It was not lost. For kick returns, Kane handled all of the kick returns. Did have that long of 82 and a touchdown, which I'll touch on later. For kicking, Aubrey did his job. 1 for 1 in field goals, 4 for 4 in extra points. A total of 7 points added on for his team. And then Wadman for the punting was pretty solid, 48.5 average, 2 punts pinned in the 20, 1 touchback, and a long of 58. And now, before I go into my notes for the Stallions, I'll also read off the stats for the Breakers, just so that I can kind of just read off my thoughts to finish up the video, as opposed to going back and forth with these two. So for the Breakers, Bethel Thompson went 20 for 28, 283 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick for a QBR of 124. On the rushing side, Hills had 34 attempts for 191 yards and 3 touchdowns. Had his way, truly. Receiving end, Adams, 6 receptions, 75 yards, touchdown. Anderson, 3 receptions for 66 yards and a touchdown. Surratt, 4 receptions for 51 yards. Morris had that 1 reception for 40 yards and a touchdown. Overall, well-rounded and solid day from this receiving corps. On the defense, you had 4 sacks, you had 4 tackles for loss, 1 interception, and 5 passes defended. You did have a forced fumble and 1 fumble on Hills that was recovered. You have the kick return, which was all right, a long of 45 from Stove, 5 returns for 154 yards. Punt return was not as great. Dixon just had 1 for -3 yards. On the kicking side of the ball, 1 for 1 in field goals and 6 for 6 in the extra point. Got his practice in. And then punting, only punted once, 39-yard punt, and it ended up being a touchback. Now let's get into my thoughts, starting with the Stallions. Exciting start to the game with the kickoff return. I think immediately Breakers fans sweating. Right, when you're the number 1 team in the league and you come out against probably the second best team in the league at that point with a touchdown in the first however many seconds of the game, that's a statement. That's a very good statement. Unfortunately, however, they allowed the game to kind of get away from them. They were not able to hang in there with the Breakers. The Breakers were able to just kind of power their way down the field almost every drive and kind of do whatever they wanted. The Stallions defense absolutely got handled, but I mean, I guess with such a high-scoring game and with 2 offenses that are so high-powered, I mean, that's kind of, I won't say expected, but you don't see the Bills and Chiefs facing off against each other and expect a defensive showdown, right? You're going to expect big numbers. There's the same thing with Chiefs and Bengals or Eagles, and you know what I mean, like these high-powered offenses, especially in the game of football nowadays. Offense is the way. The defenses, even the best defenses in the league, are going to give up a lot of points to these great offenses. So, understandable. I'm not going to knock their defense too hard for getting absolutely torched by the Breakers, because it is the Breakers. Their defensive line, though, were able to get pressure at times, but it didn't matter. It didn't faze them at all. As far as the Breakers, they had a great ability to be unfazed and answer right back every single time. I guess both teams did, but again, the Stallions kind of let the game fall away from them, while the Breakers, any time that they faced any sort of adversary, they were able to come right back into it, score, do what they had to do, gain the lead. This forces their defense to account for both the pass and the run. Any defense that has to face this Breakers team has to face a team that has the number 1 quarterback in the league, that has one of the best running backs in the league, one of the best receiving cores in the league. I'm not going to say one of the best receivers, but I think as an entire core, as a unit, Hills, Adams, Anderson, Surratt, very, very good all-around offense. It's so hard for anyone to try to stop them. And again, with Bethel being the best quarterback at the moment, in my opinion, leading the league in yards, it's just so difficult. You have the best offense in the league. Who's going to stop that? No defense is going to be able to put a stop to that at all. And you have a very solid defense that's able to get you the stops that you need and the turnovers that you need. It's crazy. This team is so good. I am not going to jinx anything. I'm not going to say too much. But if this team went on and built themselves a record, like a lossless record, I'm not saying I expect it. I expect a loss at some point during the season, but I won't say I would be too shocked if they didn't get a loss. But I digress. Those have been my thoughts. Somehow every single week has got longer and longer in runtime. I don't know how this is happening. Each and every week I've gotten less and less of a script, so maybe that's the case. I've been writing less and I've just been, talking my talk and saying my thoughts and telling y'all how I feel. So hopefully you agree with me. Maybe you disagree with me. If you do, let me know down in the comments below. As always, thank you very much for tuning in to the Weekly Huddle podcast. We appreciate you. We appreciate your ears. And we appreciate your eyes for tuning in and watch us talk about the things we like football. Like football. And like football. So, with that being said, thank you very much. I'm so glad you were able to come by, and hopefully I'll see you next week.